Oh, you got to live that technology, don't you? Yes. Okay. So we are on this journey, and whether we're talking about the Jewish community or the Christian community, no matter who we are, when we recognize this, it's not just counting 50 days. It's not just counting 50 days from Passover and first fruits to Shavuot. It represents a journey. A journey from Passover to Shavuot, a journey from Egypt to Sinai. In the Jewish world, as I said, that the Feast of Shavuot represents traditionally it is supposed to be the day when Moses receives the Ten Commandments. Moses receives the Torah at Mount Sinai. So we could say from Egypt to Sinai. And as we know in the Brit Hadashah scriptures, from the resurrection to the pouring out of the Spirit, that 50-day period. We know that for 40 days, Yeshua was with his disciples, and then he ascends to the right hand of the throne of God, and 10 days later, he indeed pours out the Ruach, which is the new covenant reality, we could say, right? And then another way of looking at it is new birth to consummation, like our whole lives. Well, we could say that every year when we come to this 50-day period, it is a reminder of that our whole life is a journey, that our life is a journey. So when we think about a journey, the definition of a journey is the act of traveling from one place to another. It's not that involved from traveling from one place to another. Usually when we think about the journey, we're thinking about the end, right? Like the journey of hope. Like it's all about the hope. Think about the hope, and which is very important, and what that means. But it is also important for us to recognize that it is a journey of hope, and how how important that is. So when I travel, I'm very different from my children when they travel, and I don't know. It's probably a little bit of age, I hate to say it, maybe, but when in talking to my children, when they travel, the goal is to get there as quickly as possible. The goal is just, okay, we got to leave like at 5 o'clock in the morning. We'll stop for maybe a 2-minute potty break. If we're going to eat something, you're going to eat in the car, and we're going to get there. Well, Janet and I think I seem to remember kind of having that attitude many decades ago. Okay, but now it's more of a case of, what's at this exit? Let's get out of the car and eat inside of a restaurant. And kind of go a little slower, and I think that for many people, when we think about the journey of faith, I think for many of us the way we're trained is to think of it in what I was saying first, that we just got to get there as quick as possible, that the goal is to die. That I have received the Lord into my life. The rest of my life is just waiting to die and be with the Lord. And because, to live as Messiah, to die is gain. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And so let's just get it over with, and then I can be with God. And, don't have to deal with it. Unfortunately, that's not what the Bible teaches, okay? The Bible teaches us that the journey is part of the new life. right? The journey itself has great value, even though the journey might be difficult. Think of our ancestors in the wilderness. How many illustrations do we have in the Bible of Israel in the wilderness? It's like a theme of the whole Bible, Israel in the wilderness, in both the Tanakh and in the Brit Hadashah, in the New Covenant. And it was a very important time of discipleship, of training the people, of learning what it means not to be a slave of Pharaoh, but to be a slave of God. All of those things. And so therefore, the journey was very important. And it's very helpful for us, I think, to embrace that, in our own lives, and to participate in the journey. You know, we are not bystanders in our walk with God. We're not like sitting on the sidelines waiting for God to do something and for us to just expire. Right? We're not to simply be bystanders, passive, and so on. We are called to be active participants and partners, co-laborers, we like to say, with the Lord. And the hope that we have is not just wishful thinking or some kind of blind optimism, but we are called to live in such a way to demonstrate the reality of the presence of God and what He has done in this world and in our lives. So to travel well on the journey and to make the most of it, it requires directions, right? We need to know how to get to the destination, right? Now, that's a whole interesting thing if you've ever traveled anywhere. Today, we are just spoiled now. We are just spoiled. I remember, I used to live in Chicago and Los Angeles. And in both of those cities, when I would travel, I was in ministry the whole time. So I'd have two books on the passenger seat. One was the Bible, and the other one was called a Thomas Guide, right? It's about this thick, and and it had the cities all laid out by big squares and numbered, so that if you had to go somewhere, you could find. You didn't have to get a big flat road map, but you could turn to different pages to know where to go. Map. Some of you may not know. Map, M-A-P. Look it up. All right? Okay. Very good. So we need directions to reach the destination. We want to take the right way. When we go down to North Carolina, we could take 70 to Zanesville and then take 77 south, or we could take 33 to 77 into West Virginia. And of course, that is the more direct route. And so that's the way to go. It's important to have good directions, right? A journey requires preparation to navigate whatever may happen along the way. You want to make sure that, you're prepared to know where to stop, or if you have your car needs repair. We need to be ready. We need to be able to navigate. We need to know how to drive, right? Don't take that for granted, right? We need to know how to drive. We need to we didn't just know about the journey, right? And then, of course, a journey requires moving forward. In other words, it's not helpful to just simply go around in circles, right? You want to get to the destination, clearly, right? Very, very important. So 1 Peter is one of the number of places in the Scriptures that helps us with this. It's a letter written to people on the journey. When you read the letter itself, and this is just one message about one part of this book, when you look at the very beginning of it, you see that it's written to people who are living in different places, right? So it says, Peter, an apostle of Messiah Yeshua, to those who reside as aliens, scattered through Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia, who are chosen, and it says according to the foreknowledge of God, and so on. And so you have three great words there. They're aliens, they're scattered, and they're chosen. And by the way, in Greek, those words are at the beginning. All three of them are at the beginning to make that point. So they are aliens, they're scattered, and they're chosen. We're not going to go into questions, are they Jewish believers? Is it a mixed group of people? Is it Gentiles? That's not our point. The point, though, is that they're on a journey. And that they are they're scattered. They are a diaspora. They are people not living, in their land. They are sojourners, one might say, right? And we could say that about all of us. We could say that about all of us, even if we were born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, and we've lived here our whole lives. As Messiah followers, we are scattered, we are aliens, and we are sojourners. And we are chosen. We are people who are on a journey. And as we know, just from looking around us, you know that we are aliens, strangers in a strange land, one might say. And so therefore, what Peter says to these people really does indeed apply to all of us. It's a letter written to people on the journey to remind them of the destination. When you read at the beginning, the word hope is prevalent. And not only at the beginning, but also farther on in the letter. The word hope is prevalent, right? It's called a living hope. Right? It is about the revelation of Messiah Yeshua. Basically, what he's referring to is the return of the Lord, the consummation. That is what he's referring to, but he calls it a living hope, as opposed to a dead hope. In other words, it is real. It is not a placebo. It is not just something that I'd like to believe might be true at the end, but it is based on a historical reality, and that is the resurrection of Messiah Yeshua. So it is a living hope. It is a real hope. And also, it has ramifications for the way that we conduct our lives today. Again, it's not just, I prayed to know Messiah, now I'm just going to wait to die. Right? No. That the hope of the future has very real meaning in our decision making and all that we do. So he's encouraging them. He's encouraging them about, don't forget the destination. Also to help them navigate through the journey. How to make the best of this journey. And then to encourage them to continue moving forward. Don't get stuck, And so we want to just take a look at a little bit of this. Right? So verses 3 to 9 is a passage we love to read. Right? That describes the destination. Right? That's where we're going. And it's like a great locker room speech. That as it says here, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Messiah Yeshua, who according to his great mercy has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of the Messiah. All right. So one thing that we want to recognize here in what he says, that sometimes in addition to the idea sometimes that we hear that we come to know a Messiah, and the only thing about knowing the Lord is dying, and being with the Lord. Something else that kind of goes with that is the mistaken belief that the goal of this life is to get out of it. That the goal is to get rid of physicality, to get rid of a body, to get rid of this world, and to just be be on the clouds, and that kind of thing. So it's interesting that when Peter begins this, I'm not going to talk about its relationship to what a bracha is. You should come on Tuesday night if you're interested in that. But anyway, but just to say this, that when he is blessing God, when he says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Messiah Yeshua, according to his great mercy, has caused us to be born again." It's kind of interesting. I know that term has taken on kind of a life of its own, although it's not used. I notice it really isn't used in recent years that much. It used to be used all the time, right? But it's interesting that it doesn't say has caused us to get rid of a body, but who has caused us to be born all over again. That's kind of interesting, right? That it is be birthed again. Not get out of birth, but be birthed again to something that is alive. A living hope through the resurrection, which is the quintessential understanding of, how wonderful God's creation is. In the resurrection of the Messiah, it was a physical resurrection. If God wanted us to get rid of bodies, Yeshua would have just been raised as a spirit, which was a big issue back in that day. And so that's kind of interesting, right? And to obtain an inheritance, that this is not all there is, that even though you're experiencing distress, that this is not all there is, that there is a finish line one day, and there'll be a new body and an inheritance, and joy inexpressible, and so on and so forth. So he describes the destination. That's where we're going, right? And then verses 10 to 12 remind us of how blessed we are to be living in the days of the coming of the Messiah. A great word of encouragement. He says how, wow, the prophets and angels would have loved to have been here right now, right? And then in verses 13 to 21, he gives instructions for the journey. So in about 5 minutes, we're going to look at the instructions for this journey. But we did get all those announcements, right? I just want to make sure. Okay, good. All right, good. Okay, so in 1 Peter 1, 13 to 21, we have indeed a set of instructions to help his listeners navigate the journey, okay? So it begins with therefore. Therefore, gird your minds for action. Keep sober in spirit, for your hope completely, fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Messiah Yeshua. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the former lusts which were yours in your ignorance. But like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves also in all of your behavior. Because it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. And if you address as Father the one who impartially judges according to each man's work, conduct yourselves in fear during the time of your stay upon the earth, knowing that you were not redeemed with perishable things like silver or gold from your futile way of life inherited from your forefathers, but with precious blood as of a lamb unblemished and spotless, the blood of Messiah. For he was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but has appeared in these last times for your sake, who through him are believers in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God. So clearly, one of the things that Peter is doing here, he is emphasizing the continuity of the Tanakh to this new covenant reality. When he talks about the prophets earlier on, and here he quotes a passage in Leviticus chapter 19 as authoritative, that he is demonstrating indeed that continuity. But he says 4 different things. First, he says, continually focus on the hope. Don't take your eyes off the prize. Press on, Paul talks about. In the book of Hebrews, in the beginning of the 12th chapter, we need to fix our eyes on Yeshua. And he uses the illustration of a race. What's interesting here is that in verse 13, here I have in my translation, gird your minds for action. Gird the loins of your mind is actually what it says. Gird the loins of your mind. So that immediately, when you hear that, gird the loins, right? Doesn't it remind you of Passover? Doesn't it remind you of of what Moses told the children of Israel to do that night when they eat the Passover meal with your loins girded, your staff, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand? Be ready to go. In other words, be diligent, be prepared. Don't just, so to speak, wait for something to happen, but take initiative, right? And we also read that in Ephesians 6:14, where we read, gird the loins of your mind with truth, I believe it says, something to that effect. And so it is about being proactive. We could say about being disciplined, about being prepared, about recognizing that there is a journey at hand, recognizing that there is a goal and I need to move forward to get there. That is something that we need to always remember, because we live in a world where even though we lament, and it's not like the good old days or anything like that, but for us, we are knee deep in our lives and marriages and children and careers and what do I want to be and what's the next move for us and my finances and just all those things that are all really important can take our eyes off of the journey and sort of make us add Yeshua to the constellation of different parts of my life. And then Yeshua simply becomes like a self-help approach. Right? To make me a better me, I will know the Lord. Rather than seeing us we have been called to travel, right? So what we have in verse 13, continually focus on the hope. Think and act strategically with the finish line in mind, right? Okay. Then in verses 14 to 16, very interesting, we're called not only to, think about the end of the journey and be diligent to travel to it, but in doing so, develop the moral and ethical character of God. Right? Be image bearers of God. Develop the moral and ethical character of God. Again, recognizing we're not just simply adding Yeshua to our way of life, but that we are in the process of not conforming, but being transformed. We know that, right? The famous passage in Romans chapter 12, right? In verses 1 and 2. I urge you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. That, as it says here in First Peter, it really is rather interesting. Here he says in verse 14, as obedient children, do not be conformed to the former lusts which were yours in your ignorance, right? Do not be conformed to the former lust. Now, don't get hung up on lusts, like it's just talking about, sexual things. But basically what it is saying is that you have been redeemed, like from the domain of darkness to the kingdom of his beloved Son, as we read in Colossians chapter 1, to a new way of life, to a different way, regardless of Jewish, Gentile, or whatever, that in Messiah, in the new covenant reality, there is indeed a new way. Not a new morality, not a new ethic, but indeed life is enveloped in Messiah, Yeshua. And one of the things that we all recognize when we not only receive the Lord, but walk with him more and more, we see that the culture around us becomes less and less reflective of our own values and how God wants us to live. And so more and more it's like we're a stranger, and more we're like an alien. And we always have to ask ourselves, how much of this culture am I letting in? How much am I letting seep in? I'm not always doing so, intentionally, but it seeps in, and I always have to be careful, and that is what Peter is saying. And so then he uses the word holy, right? Be holy yourselves. Like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves. Okay, so holiness, first of all, what Peter is speaking about is not about using the word in our culture, religious. He's not referring to worship services. And he's not referring to holiday celebrations. And he's not referring to Jewish badges of identity, rituals. Let us use that term. He's not referring to rituals, as good as they may be. That's not what he's talking about. So he quotes, very interesting, Leviticus chapter 19 in verse 2. But I would suggest that he has in mind Leviticus chapters 18 and 19. And we're just going to look very, very briefly at a couple of verses here. In Leviticus chapter 18, this is a great passage. We talk about it from time to time. Just in verse 3, 3 and 4. You are not to do what is done in the land of Egypt when you live there, nor are you to do what is done in the land of Canaan, where I'm bringing you. You shall not walk in their statutes. In other words, don't live like the people where you and your father and your grandfather and your great-grandfather and everyone else was living in Egypt. I mean, they were there for hundreds of years, right? And you're going to a land I've given you, this land of Canaan. Don't live like them either, okay? You are to live my way, okay? Now, there might have been some things that overlapped. If you look at Egyptian law and culture and just ancient Near Eastern law and culture, there are some things that might overlap. But Israel was called to live a way that reflected the God of Israel. And so that's why he says, you're to perform my judgments and keep my statutes to live in accord with them. I am the Lord your God. Okay? So very clearly, embrace the moral and ethical attributes of God. And you know that when you go to chapter 19, and when we read here in verse 2, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy, that he's referring to, yes, approaching God uniquely and approaching other people in an ethical and moral way showing dignity, especially to people who are vulnerable in the society, right? Okay, so one thing that's really really interesting, I'll just leave it at interesting. He starts with, every one of you shall reverence his mother and his father, and you shall keep my Shabbats. I am the Lord your God. It's kind of interesting. And then he talks about approaching God in the correct way, right? Not as pagans, but uniquely as children of Israel, right? But then once you get to verse 11, all the way to verse 18, it's all of these statements about how to treat people. And I always like to use verse 14 as an illustration of this. It says there, you shall not curse a deaf man, nor place a stumbling block before the blind. Right? That makes sense. In other words, these are vulnerable people, and don't hurt them, right? But then after that, the text, what it doesn't say is, it doesn't say, help a deaf person, or remove the stumbling block from the... It doesn't say that. It just says, you shall revere your God. I am the Lord, you shall revere your God. May I suggest revering God is to demonstrate his holiness, and that is to show loving kindness, mercy, and grace to people in need, no matter who they are. And then when you come to the end of this section, yes, Leviticus 19:18, love your neighbor as yourself. And it's interesting that Yeshua basically, when he's asked what's the greatest commandment, of course, love the Lord your God and so on, but then love your neighbor as yourself. He doesn't mention another 611 laws of Torah. Love your neighbor as yourself. In Romans 13:9 and Galatians 5:14 and James 2:8, we basically read that the Torah is summed up in love your neighbor as yourself. Focus on that. And so when we identify ourselves as we're Torah people, living the Torah way of life, God forbid we should not be loving our neighbor as ourselves. Because that is, when we talk about that way of life, it is the moral and ethical way of life that God demonstrates toward us. And so on the journey, yes, fix our hope on the end, on the finish line. And yes, be disciplined to keep moving forward. And may we live in the kind of holiness that demonstrates itself in dignity toward others and approaching God, of course, uniquely as the God of Israel. And then the third thing that he says basically is to remember your accountability. Back here in 1 Peter, I'll just say this, that we need to remember that as John Cantor once said when he spoke here, we play to an audience of one, that we are accountable. We may think we're getting away with something when nobody here knows about it. But rest assured, God knows about it. Right? We're playing with fire when we think that, I just live a certain way and nobody knows, and I've gotten away with it so far. I know that it may not be right, but the fact of the matter is we need to live in fear of the Lord. And I know we're quick to say it doesn't mean be afraid, but I think there's a little bit of that in there. There's a little bit of that in there. We need to fear the judgment of God. Now we might say, but I have the ticket to heaven. I have the Yeshua ticket, right? That is not how we're supposed to ever understand knowing the Messiah. We read in a number of places, you can read them on your own. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 10 to 15, we will answer for how we have conducted our lives. God is going, it gives new meaning to the song, "Come on, baby, light my fire," right? Because it says that God is going to basically take a match to everything we've done. And some things are just going to burn up, and other things will last. We need to ask ourselves, what am I spending my life doing? Am I spending my life doing things that are going to burn up, or things that are going to count forever? Much of that is the way we do them, the attitude in which we do them. Some of us, we may have all kinds of jobs. Let us not feel that my job is irrelevant and it's just going to burn up. No. Whether you are a brain surgeon or a custodian at a junior high school, it doesn't matter in that regard. What matters is, are we serving the Lord? Are we doing it, indeed for Him? And then, of course, in terms of this accountability, we read, among other parables, the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, right? When we've each been given an allotment. I won't say of what. An allotment. The day will come when God is going to say, "What did you do with everything I gave you?" And may He say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Right? May we have His priorities. May we have His desires. That is what it means to travel on His journey. Not my own journey, but on His journey that He has given me in this life. And finally, remember the quality of your redemption. The quality of your redemption. We're not redeemed with money or anything that will change in value or perish. This had meaning to the Roman world because one way that slaves could be redeemed was actually by giving money to a god and then being redeemed or released by the god. And certainly when he says not redeemed with money or anything like that will change in value or perish, it does speak to us in that it is for sure. It's for sure. The work of Messiah will indeed last forever. We are redeemed by the precious blood of Messiah. Remember we talked about that? Gave a whole message on the blood of Messiah. Cleansed, forgiven, given entree to God in all of that. And by the way, another allusion to the Passover. Not only loins girded, but the spotless lamb. Also, Peter is weaving that thought into this whole understanding, right? And so finally, as those who have tasted the kindness of the Lord, let us continue the journey to the world to come. At the beginning of chapter 2 of 1 Peter, he says there, "Therefore, putting aside all malice and all guile and hypocrisy and envy and all slander, like newborn babes, long for the pure milk of the word, that by it you may grow in respect to salvation, if you have tasted of the kindness of the Lord." And so, taste of the kindness of the Lord. Psalm 34, and I just want to close with these words from Psalm 34, which I will suggest is also traveling in the background of this letter. Psalm 34, and I'm just going to read verse 8 and a couple of other verses. There we go. Here we go. "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. How blessed is the man who takes refuge in Him. Oh, fear the Lord, you His saints, for to those who fear Him there is no want. The young lions do lack and suffer hunger, but they who seek the Lord shall not be in want of any good thing. Come, you children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Who is the man or the person who desires life and loves length of days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil, your lips from speaking deceit. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Yes, may we indeed travel on this road. May we seek the pure milk of the Word of God. May we grow in our walk with you. May we move forward in it. May we demonstrate the life of Messiah by the way that we carry ourselves. And may people join up on this journey with us as we keep our eyes fixed on our hope, Messiah Yeshua. Let's pray.